Hey, it's Josh with Budget Mechanic. Today I'm working on this 2005 Toyota Sienna with the 3.3 V6 in it, and I'm going to be replacing the alternator and as well, if it needs it, the alternator belt. Well, let's get started. So to get this alternator out, it's fairly straightforward because it's right here up on top. We're just going to kind of move some stuff out of the way, break the wires loose, take the belt off, it should come right out. So first things first, because we are going to be dealing with the power to the alternator, I'm going to remove the negative terminal on the battery. I'm just going to loosen this AC line fitting just to give myself a little bit of flexibility. Once I remove this tab, then I can kind of move this around a little more. Next, I'm going to work on the wires to the alternator. So under this boot here, got a 10mm nut. Pull that out, and then we can just unhook this lead. The next one is this control wire clip right here on the right hand side. You push that in, plug comes right out. So this tab right there you push on the back. Now I'm going to crack this pivot bolt loose on the alternator. It's a 14mm. They can be pretty tight, so I use my larger ratchet. Okay, next I'm going to break loose this tensioner lock bolt. Here's the tensioner right here, but I gotta loosen the locker first. 12mm. Now I can actually start releasing the tension on the alternator belt by loosening this guy. You should start to see the alternator pivoting down and the belt loosening up. Okay, now that the belt's off, I can actually go back and remove this tensioner locking bolt that I just loosened before. Okay, so I'm just gonna pull the bolt out, and this block down here is gonna stay in the same place. Just keep an eye on the orientation. You can kind of see this hole is on one side of the block, and on mine the hole is on the bottom side versus this way. Now that that bolt is out, we can come back to the main pivot bolt. This one can be pretty sticky. You might have to thread it all the way out. There we go. Pull it out. Okay, sometimes you can just wiggle these free. This one looks like it's pretty loose. If you have a sticky one, it's good to take a pry bar and you get it in between the alternator and this mount, and you just lever it out. There we go. As always, when you get the old alternator out, you want to check it against your new one, make sure that it's going to match. I actually am not going to be replacing this one because this one's in good shape, but you would want to check your plug style, make sure it's the same as the new one, that it's in the same position with your leads, and also just double check this spacing. You want to make sure that this is not a huge difference from the new one. Okay, now to put your alternator back, or the new alternator in, just want to make sure as you go in that these plugs end up facing upward, and we're aiming for this slot to line up first so I can get that large bolt to hold its place. Okay, one important note, you want to make sure before that this alternator goes into place that this wiring harness gets shoved inside of this black bracket, so it doesn't interfere with the belt later on. And there's actually a little clip on the harness that clips into a slot on the timing belt cover. So once that's in there, then you can lower your alternator into place. Just gotta find that hole. There it is. For this second bolt going into the alternator, you want to make sure that the block on the tensioner is oriented with the hole down, and then you've just got to go through the block to your bolt and try to find the threads on the alternator. This is always a bit of a adventure. Usually you got to lift the alternator up, swing it up on that upper bolt until you find it. There, I got it. So you want to just finger tighten it, but not too tight that it hinders it from pivoting. Next step, you're going to put your belt back in. You can save a little money by reusing your belt if it's in good shape, because it's not a hard one to get to. You can check that by rolling it over to the ribs, and if you pinch it and there's cracks running along the crossways, it's time for a new belt. But this one looks like it's in great shape, so I'm going to reuse it. It's going to go around your crankshaft pulley, right down there, over to your AC compressor, right here, and then last step will be up to the alternator, just in a big triangle. So I'm going to start with the hardest one first, that crank pulley all the way back there. So I'm going to use this screwdriver just to loop it over the pulley in the back. Over the alternator. Cool. Just make sure it's seated properly. Okay, so now I'm going to put tension on this belt. And if I lift up on the alternator with one hand, I can just finger tighten this tensioner. So you want to tighten that tensioner up on the alternator to the point where when you reach down with a screwdriver, kind of in the mid-span area, that it deflects maybe down 3/4 of an inch, half an inch or so. You don't want it to be rock hard. That would be too tight. And then if you start up the car or you turn on your air conditioning and the belt starts squealing, you know you got to tighten it up a little bit. So when your tension is set, you're going to come in here and lock the tensioner with this sideways facing bolt, 12mm. And that just holds the sliding part so it doesn't ever loosen. I'm just going to snug that up. And now you're also going to tighten up that main pivot bolt, the 14mm. So time to plug in the alternator with the electrical plug here, and then we have our positive lead over the post to make sure it's all the way seated down and the little teeth are in their holes. And I'm just going to get that boot nice and snug down on top of the plug. I'm going to reattach this little bracket on the AC line. And last of all, reconnect the battery. All right, good job. Just as a side note, if your battery was dead before doing this job, make sure you charge it before you turn the car on, because a brand new alternator will fry a battery. But other than that, you're good to go. Thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful, and please subscribe. See you next time.